So, some thoughts on kindness. I This is my want. I got to thinking about kindness, and you know how sometimes you bump into a word or something, and you go, I don't know. That's really a strange word or a strange concept, and I started to wonder. It's like, well, what is kindness anyway? And other than kind of being nice or something like that, which is pleasant enough, why should we be kind? And how does this fit into the Buddhist teachings? And then I thought about, Pat a couple weeks ago. He said, "Are our thoughts, words, and actions leading to harm or harmony?" He says, if our North Star is to reduce harm and support harmony, that's our practice. Yeah, so kindness, to reduce harm, support harmony, that's our practice. And that he said it's foundational to bridge separation. It's the way forward for all of our species. Yeah, that sounds right. But why? And then Susan last week, when she was talking about racism, I loved the quote, the proverb that she quoted: "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." How important it is to feel warmth. And we do such strange things to try to feel warmth. What's that about anyway? How does that work? So I started to inquire into it, and as it happens, I ended up with about 5 talks on kindness. And we'll try to do just one of them tonight. And maybe I'm teaching again in July, and we'll try to continue it again there. But if kindness is just so foundational to to everything that's in our practice. And, it's just like again, if we don't just think of it as a way you're supposed to be, how do we make sense of it? So there's sort of lots of different dimensions. I'm going to talk about some of the different dimensions that I've touched into in my inquiry, but don't try to keep track of them all. I just would invite you to, as you listen, to really stay tuned to your own well-being and your own goodness and gladness, and just watch and see if there's anything that kind of, does that thing. It kind of rings a bell, and that, resonates for you. It's like, oh, this is something that feels right, or this is something that I can even do in contributing to harmony, or contributing to the warmth of the village, or contributing to my own inner harmony, or the warmth of my own little inner village. So just look for, as you as I speak, look for whatever is very personally meaningful for you. And at the same time, I think one of them, I can't remember who, it was Pat or Susan, quoted Reverend William Barber, who said, "We must refuse to be comforted too quickly." So he said there is work to do. And so to kind of put all of that in the the kind of the kindness container, it's like, okay, well, kindness isn't just la. And actually, one of my hesitations about when I first started thinking about it, about even speaking to kindness tonight, was that it's like, okay, I don't want to do, I don't want myself to go into la, into some kind of, ethereal, lovely speaking about kindness, but that doesn't have any substance or, real relevance to to what we're doing in our actual lives these days. So there are actually several things that I touched into in my own inquiry, and I'm sure I won't get to all of them tonight. I wanted to talk in general, some thoughts about kindness as the most central teaching of our practice, actually. And it's why the Dalai Lama says, "My religion is kindness." It's because it's so very central. And it isn't just the Dalai Lama saying, I'm trying to be a nice guy. That's not really what he's doing. So first, I want to just talk in general about kindness. Secondly, the ways that our hearts and minds already know and immediately recognize the importance of kindness. Third, I want to touch into some confusions, what kindness isn't. There are near enemies of kindness that we can get very confused about, and actually be practicing in a way that isn't so wholesome. To really to not create some kind of false positiveness because we're not relating to the teaching or relating to what's going on in the world quite properly. And then I want to speak to cultivating. How do we cultivate kindness ever more deeply, ever more pervasive? Ways that we try to be kind, but that don't ultimately work, and that can't possibly work. Receiving kindness, small moments of kindness, and then expanding outward from that. So as I said, this is approximately, I figure, about 5 talks. So we'll see what we can do in making it into actually. We'll try to make it into one reasonably length talk tonight, and then go from there. So a little bit about kindness in general. Kindness is the heart, really, the central piece of all of our practice, and indeed of all spiritual traditions. I was raised Catholic, and so I go back to my Catholic or Christian teachings, but Jesus saying, "Love one another as I have loved you." Be kind to one another as I have been kind to you. And that we might imagine that what he was saying, or what the thing about kindness is that it's something about behaving well, or somehow being politically correct, or being nice. And there is a way that kindness speaks to behaving well in the sense of the precepts, where there are some guides about how to behave. But it's not about being politically correct, but it's about how to live in harmony with the Dharma, with the way things actually work, with the way things are in this world. I read a quote from Sharon Salzberg, who teaches a lot about kindness. She says, "Practicing kindness illuminates our inner integrity because it relieves us of the need to deny different aspects of ourselves. We can open to everything with the healing force of love. When we feel love, our mind is expansive and open enough to include the entirety of life in full awareness, both its pleasures and its pains. We feel neither betrayed by pain or overcome by it, and thus we can contact that which is undamaged within us, regardless of the situation. Kindness sees truly that our integrity is inviolate, no matter what our life situation may be." So I'm going to just say that again. Kindness is the ability to embrace all parts of ourselves, as well as all parts of the world. All parts of the world. It relieves us of the need to deny different aspects of ourselves. We can open to everything with the healing force of love, in full awareness, both its pleasures and its pains. We feel neither betrayed by pain or overcome by it. we can contact that which is undamaged within us and all beings, regardless of the situation. Kindness sees truly that our integrity, our wholeness is inviolate, no matter what our life situation may be. I go back to Pat's teaching when he was talking about living in harmony. Living in harmony with the wholeness of our integrity, no matter what our life situation may be. So kindness is really about knowing emptiness and no self. The deepest, most profound of teachings. Andrew Holochuk says the expression of emptiness is love. The nature of reality is made of the fabric of love. The nature of reality is made of the fabric of love. Man, we could contemplate just that much for a long time. I'd like to offer a very imperfect metaphor, not nearly as profound as what Andrew is saying or Sharon Salzberg. But you know what? It struck me as it's a very imperfect metaphor in many ways. But it struck me. It's sort of like, you know, when you think of our body and you know, the different organs of our body. It's like, well, are the kidneys being kind to the lungs or to the heart? Is the heart being kind to the liver? You know, it's like the idea. The ideal is that they work in harmony and that things work together, but it isn't like there's some separate kidney or some separate liver that can just kind of go off and function by itself fine, and I can be just fine all by myself and just function perfectly. But that there's this kind of wholeness, and that in some sense kindness becomes irrelevant because it's just the way things are. So to not be in opposition, is really what kindness is about. It's about opening. Sharon Salzberg talks about opening, not being in opposition, which is actually when we, you know, come to it. It's when I come to it. It's like, whoa, that's a tall order. When I read the Washington Post in the morning, to not be in opposition, how do you do that? And again, that kind of touches into idiot kindness a little bit, which we'll try to get to. So the Buddhist teaching on kindness is a practice where he says, I will abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I just love that term, abundant, exalted, immeasurable. Abundant, exalted, kindness. It is by definition, and it's by just the way things are, kindness is abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Nevertheless, when it's stated that way, it can seem pretty intimidating. How could I possibly aspire to, much less measure up to that? And furthermore, what does this have to do with all the depths of the injustices now, with pandemics and racism and police riots? You know, just when I started to think about it, it's like, okay, A, it doesn't make sense, and B, which is really A, it's like, whoa, I'm pretty far from that when I think about pandemics and racism and police riots. The thing is, you know, we already know how important kindness is because it resonates deeply for all of us. As human beings, we are all touched by kindness. We're touched by kindness. Not like, I mean, we all receive it, but that isn't what I mean. I mean that when we recognize kindness, there's a goodness to it that we know, that we can resonate with. Again, sort of like the bell, you know, that there's a goodness to kindness that we all resonate with. you know, the motorists who stop, you know, the little things in the news, the little motorists who stop with the little ducks that walk across the road. And we go, oh, that's so cute. That's so sweet. You know, everybody's stopping for those little baby ducks. There was a thing, I know you probably saw it, that Sean Marcus Drumgoole in Nashville, where he lived in a neighborhood that had gradually, he's a black man, and he lived in a neighborhood that had gradually gentrified. And he wrote on his neighborhood little newspaper that he was afraid to go out for a walk. He had gotten so that he was afraid to go out for a walk after the shooting. And 45 of his neighbors showed up on his doorstep to walk with him. And we go, oh. And you can just sort of feel it in your own body, even as I say that. It's like, oh, good. There's a goodness in that. There's another thing in the news, Zay Jones, who's a wide receiver apparently for the Las Vegas Raiders. I wouldn't know. But he was in a grocery store, and an elderly white woman was shopping there, and she came up and she said, I'm from Minneapolis, and I just want you to know that you matter. You know, that she really was willing to approach them and say, you matter. I just want you to know you matter. You can even look right now in your body and just see if any of those stories resonate for you. I read another story. There was a woman who was a deep sea researcher, and she did a lot of snorkeling and scuba diving in waters with big fish, big animals, dolphins and whales. And she was in the water with this whale, and it kept bumping her. And it really was bruising her. It was kept bumping her, and she got really frightened. And she isn't somebody who got usually frightened. She got really frightened, and at one point the whale caught her under its pectoral fin and was kind of almost holding her there. And she thought, I'm going to die here. The whale's going to dive and it's going to kill me. And what she, after a while, what she realized is that there were big sharks, man-eating sharks that were off in the distance, and the whale was protecting her. And it protected her to get her back to her boat. You know, or Susan's story from last week, where she talked about just a little moment in the grocery store with the grocery clerk. There was a story of a woman who searched for her neighbor's dog who had run away in the aftermath of a tornado. The neighbor's house had been damaged and the dog ran away. And the woman searched for the dog and said, this is something I can do. So again, as you listen to the talk, the invitation to you is to find this is something I can do. So kindness is this huge, big, deep, profound teaching that we could go on and on and on about. And in the moment, it comes down to, what is something I can do? You know, I can stop for the ducks, or I can greet someone at a grocery store, or I can help find somebody's dog. This is something I can do. So I invite you, as you listen, just keep wondering, what is something I can do? This is the Buddha. He says, when a noble disciple recollects the Dhamma thus, and he's talking about kindness, on that occasion, his mind is not obsessed by lust, hatred, or delusion. You could even notice that as I tell those stories, you know, that your mind isn't obsessed by those things. It's filled with gladness, filled with kindness, filled with happiness. His mind is straight with the Dhamma as its object. This is called a noble disciple who dwells evenly amid an uneven population. We have some uneven populations these days. Who dwells without affliction amid an afflicted population who is entered upon the stream of the Dhamma and develops recollection of the Dhamma. I love that. Somebody who dwells evenly amid an uneven population, who dwells without affliction amid an afflicted population. You know, one of the things that strikes many of us as, as we deal with the day's events and the day's news is, is some challenge about the enormity of it all. And so again, finding this is something I can do, whatever this is. Ajahn Suchito says, kindness as a Dhamma practice is the skill of extending goodwill so that one's heart isn't taken over by ill will. If you will, filling up the space. Cultivating ever deeper and more pervasive qualities of kindness. We're always taking refuge in something, wherever it is that our mind goes. And the practice is to cultivate taking refuge in kindness. I want to talk a little bit about the ways that we try to be kind that don't work so well. And I'm going to ask a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye for help with that. Ways that we try to be kind and ways that we look for that refuge in ways that don't ultimately work. And what I'll do is I will post into the chat box. Some of you will ask for it later. Let me just see how to do that. To everyone. There we go. So I posted in the chat box just the title of the poem if you want to look for it later. And the title of the poem is Kindness. And while it doesn't touch into the deepest of the Buddha's teachings, it does help us see what doesn't, remember what doesn't work. And Naomi wrote this poem, she says, when she was on her honeymoon with her husband. So she's on her honeymoon in Colombia. And they're on a bus riding along in Colombia. And they were attacked by robbers. And the robbers took everything that they had. Took their possessions, they took their money, they took their jewelry, and they left, they killed somebody and left him by the side of the road. And so that evening, Naomi writes this poem about kindness, of all things. After she was wandering around the central square in some town in Colombia, and her husband had gone off to see what he could do about, getting money sent to them. And so she was alone and she was wandering around, and a stranger came up to her and asked her if she was okay. And she told him the story, and he said, "I'm so sorry." In Spanish, he says to her, "I'm so sorry." It's like the older woman in the grocery store with the football player, just, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And it so moved her at that moment of just intense vulnerability. And so she sat down in the square and she wrote this poem. I'll read you part of it right now. She says, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. And it strikes me that, there's so much that we know these days about, what we held in our hands, what we counted and carefully saved. The routines, the familiarities, the trips to the grocery store, the times out for dinner with our friends, the basketball games, the trips to the ocean, whatever it is, what we counted and carefully saved, what we counted on and carefully saved, all this has gone. And we've lost things. The racism, the trust in our elected officials, the trust in our police force, the police force's trust in the community, the sense of centuries of racism that Susan talked about last week, and the illusion that everything was okay, that we want to kind of hide out in or imagine. All this must go. Before you know what kindness really is, Naomi says, you must lose things. So what a wonderful opportunity we have to know what kindness really is. You must feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. So we imagine that we can hold on to things. That when this COVID issue is over, when these anti-racism demonstrations end, when the political climate changes, when our favorite politician gets elected, then we can go back to normal life, and then we can be kind. Then we can be happy. We can go back to our favorite grocery stores. We can drink beer and root in person for our favorite team or whatever it is that we want to do. Then we can be kind. And Naomi is saying, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. She talks in her poem about impermanence and the absence of personal control. Impermanence, things change, and we don't have any control over them. Boy, are we getting that lesson these days, even with the weather, My family's at the ocean this week, and we didn't go because of COVID, but it's like eight inches of rain down there today. You can't count on anything. And we can't count on things to not change. Naomi, again, she's talking in her poem. She says, how you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. We think we'll be healthy forever. We think our loved ones will live forever. Everything will stay the way it is. She says, before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. She had that experience. You must see how this could be you. How he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. So maybe we're not beset by violent robbers, but we're beset by a lot of violence these days. You must see how this could be you or someone whom you hold very dear. Indeed, the Buddha invites us to notice that we can be intoxicated by our belief in the value of holding on to the kindness of things, the kindness of a bowl of strawberries or something. And it isn't like those are wrong. Buddha's teachings can be misunderstood, that those are wrong. It's just that we can't count on them, and they're not permanent. They're not the ultimate resource for us. And so he invites us always to contemplate the fragility and impermanence of all of life, not just now. Like Naomi, he invites us to let go of our reliance on what is not reliable. Our reliance on what is not reliable. And to discover something deeper, something that simply is, that we can see and touch and taste and smell when we let go of that which gets in the way. And that was the great gift, actually, of that experience that Naomi had, that she was forced to let go of everything that got in the way. And in a way, that's where we are right now. I mean, not in a way, it's absolutely where we are right now, as we are forced to let go of the things that got in the way. So the Buddha invites us to take that deeper refuge in what is not solid in the world of form, but which is totally reliable and indestructible in the world of the formless. Abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Another way that we can get confused about kindness is that we can think that kindness means that there's kindness for some. You know, for some parts of ourselves, but not others. For some parts of others, for some others, but not some others. Ajahn Pasana tells a lovely story that he heard from Bhante Gunaratana, who was Bhante Gunaratana is the abbot of the monastery up in Winchester. He's actually come to IMCC to talk a couple times. And he was invited to Europe. He was going to Europe to teach. And so he was on the phone with the woman who was arranging his teaching. And she, just before he was about to leave, she said to him, you're not going to teach anything about loving kindness, are you? In actual fact, loving kindness is a major foundation for the reasons that I'm describing of what Bhante Gunaratana teaches. It is like foundational to all of our practice. And she says, please don't teach on loving kindness. She said, and when he inquired into it, he realized that she thought that she was supposed to have it for everybody. And that at the moment she didn't feel it for everybody. She had been in the through the Second World War, and being Jewish, had lost many family members in her culture. So she had the hope that you're not going to make me do loving kindness for those people, are you? You know, so we can be confused in two ways there. One is that we can think we could somehow get away with loving kindness for some parts of ourselves or some parts of the world and not others. And the other is that we could, at the other extreme, we could imagine that somehow the only kind of loving kindness to have is something that is like so enlightened and so full and so complete that everything else we should criticize ourselves for. Sharon Salzberg also tells a story about Miles Horton, who is a radical. He had a school for civil rights protesters in the 60s and later for people beginning the environmental movement. And he said, the man's name is Miles Horton, he said, Martin Luther King used to say to me all the time, you've got to love everybody. And I used to say, no, I don't. I only have to love the people worth loving. And King would laugh and laugh, and he would say, nope, you've got to love everybody. Really? We imagine that we can hold on to a sense of a separate, independent self who is other than those others. So kindness, again, is the ability to embrace all parts of ourselves, all parts of the world. It illuminates, Sharon Salzberg says, our inner integrity. Again, integrity can take us in an incomplete direction when it means somehow purity or rectitude or uprightness or something like that. But what she means by that is wholeness or undividedness. Or my personal favorite, the whole enchilada. You know, it goes back to the non-separation that both Pat and Susan spoke of. So metta or kindness is the ability to embrace the whole enchilada. And the mind wants to divide the enchilada out into parts that are mine or me, or aspects of ourselves that we like or approve of, or good parts or bad parts. The mind wants to do this, whether we're speaking of divisions between ourselves and people who disagree with us, or divisions within our own being. I am this, you are that, this is good, this isn't. Solzhenitsyn, who was a Soviet dissident, he says, if only it were all so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? I think I'd like to stop there with a invitation. Oh, actually, why don't I read the whole poem to you, and then I'll stop with an invitation, make a little bit of room in case anybody has a question, and if not, we'll just end early. So I'll read you the whole poem. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is you I have been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. So I'd like to pick up maybe with the second part of the poem, and then talk and speak a bit more in the next talk about some of the practical ways that we can work with the teachings on kindness, just some very practical kinds of things. So I'm going to just leave you with a couple of thoughts about some practical things. And again, to just, I'm thinking about the woman who searched for her neighbor's dog. And people said, well, that was very kind. And she said, this is something I can do. I can't rebuild the house. I can't, make people come back alive. But I can search for her dog. And she found it. She found the dog. And the other is to maybe, in the meditation tonight, I invited you to just contemplate receiving kindness. So just a little homework assignment, if you like, to do, you could kind of look for one or two things. One is to just notice in the news any teachings on kindness. And there are actually quite a few of them if you look. And notice how it affects your body to read them or see them or watch those videos. And see if you could just pause for one extra little beat or two extra little beats to allow the goodness of that to just be there when you see kindness. And the other is to notice when you receive it, even little small ways. I was some time ago, I was walking on a boardwalk on a dock next to some water, and there was a man there who was working on his boat. And just as I was about to pass, he said, "Watch out for the hose now." And it just really struck me. It was such a kindness, just that simple little thing. Watch out for the hose now. So I invite you to kind of watch for the kindnesses that you receive. So to just very simply, in very small ways, to see what it might be like to bring a bit more attention to the experience of kindness.